Hello once again, and a very, very warm welcome to Sweet Omagh Town Internet Radio. And all being well, I should look to my right and see my good friend Mr. Ford.
Yes, verily, for I am here. How are you doing, Donald?
I'm fine.
Are you coming out of lockdown?
I'm great. I had family down to see me at the weekend.
Right.
For first time since March.
Oh.
I had a birthday since I seen you last.
My
Mr. Ford.
goodness.
And I was eating my favourite food.
Which was?
Digestive biscuits and peanut butter.
There's no accounting for taste.
Do you know something about peanut butter?
I don't like peanut butter.
You're going to remember this. Do you remember when you were a young child, there was a television program called The Talking Mr. Ed, the horse?
Oh, yes, the white horse that peered over the half door.
Yes. And he spoke with his lips perfectly sunk to some man's voice.
It was brilliant.
You know what they give him? Peanut butter. See, that's what kept his gums thick and keep.
Oh, I see. I remember I was fascinated by Mr. Ed. I was completely convinced that the horse was talking.
What do you mean convinced? He was talking. Oh, goodness.
Oh, innocent times.
Sure. What do you make? You couldn't make it up. So, what's in the agenda today?
Well, let's delve into local history.
Do you know what I like to do? Apart from get out and meet people.
And eat digestive biscuits with peanut butter.
We will, with your permission, go back up Gallows Hill.
Right, okay.
Do you remember that we spoke to the late Willie McGrew, and he lived out at Gardenville at that time, but he was one of the many families who lived up the hill.
Right.
So many families in that end of the town have travelled the world.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It was a wee community of its own.
It was. And I'll tell you better than that, Declan. It was a true community in the sense that people talk today about integrated communities and things like that. Those people lived neighbour by neighbour and got on with their lives and were never even conscious of anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's only, possibly in later years that people become more self-aware, or call it what you like, or self-conscious about where you went on a Sunday and stuff. Up the hill, people seem it was a non-event.
Yeah. And as I say, that whole sense of community is something that over the years I have noticed in the interviews that we've done. Yeah. That the kind of sense of being part of a collective of human beings who treated each other with decency and respect and friendship.
Yes. And you remember the late Dorothy Rowe.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know her, Dorothy Rowe was a very well-regarded psychologist and writer of many books. She came to Omagh some years ago to visit and to research a book that she was writing about. And this was after the 98 event, obviously. But she was amazed at the friendliness of Omagh, that she could go up Omagh Street. She reminds me, she said she was standing at what's obviously the bus depot waiting on a bus, and people would speak to her. She says, and all her life, where she lived in London, North London, she says, if someone spoke to you at a bus stop, you tend to walk away.
Right.
But she says, in Omagh, it was just seen as a done thing, that someone would pass the market day or whatever. And I think that's what's very special about Omagh Town, is that it is such a town where you can stand at the bus stop and pass the time of day with someone without feeling threatened or looking for information or whatever.
Well, that puts me in mind. I was over in London, and my son was studying in London, and my daughter was still at school. But we went over anyhow, and we were standing in Oxford Street, and you can imagine how busy Oxford Street was. And as I say, the people would walk over you and through you. And my daughter, who's very much an Omagh person, looked and she says, I don't like this place. Nobody knows me. And my son said, I love this place. Nobody knows me.
Yeah,
so it's that strange.
Yeah,
the same,
that's it. Yeah.
The same place.
Yes. Dorothy said that she was amazed at the friendliness of the town and how articulate the people of the town were, because she listened to many documentaries on Omagh during that time after 98, and a lot of interviews. She says, and everyone could speak their story and their tales.
Oh, she was a lovely woman. Do you remember the time we went up to Belfast with her to see
the Weir,
the Royal Court Theatre in London? We're putting it on, and sat in a wee bar in Leitrim, and the poor barman, and they asked a question. No, and now meant so much from despair to resignation to acceptance. And you were talking about Dorothy's reaction to Omagh, and I was just thinking of the programme we did a number of weeks ago on the late great John Prine, and apparently when he met his wife in Windmill Studios in Dublin, and then subsequently went up with her to Donegal, he didn't want to leave, because Donegal and the little towns in Donegal reminded him so much of where he had been born and reared. And he said it was like stepping back into 1950s rural America. That and we still have that, I think, that kind of sense of innocence. And
yes, and that sense of friendliness. I think, I think in Ireland, when my father's time, when he drove a car, if he met someone on the road, he acknowledged that driver just with the point of the finger. Not one finger up in the air, what you get today. But that sort of human acknowledgement that someone's on the road, and those roads were obviously so narrow in those days that you had to maybe pull over to the one side. But that sense of haste we've got ourselves into now this last few years, I suppose.
Well, but I think the recent pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, that has kind of, I think, made us reassess and take another look at our lives and the way that we're existing day to day. And the lockdown is kind of easing off. How's it for you, anyhow?
I don't know. I'm looking forward to see you with a mask. I just can't wait to see you come through the door.
Yeah, I have my mask bought.
Have you?
Oh, yes. Oh. I have a nice linen mask, a light green linen mask. 4 layers of linen.
My goodness. Is that to keep people in or people out?
Wouldn't you love to get a mask with on it, like the Joker's smile on it, that maniacal grin? But, in all seriousness, with the regard to the mask, what about people who are deaf? How will they communicate? How will they lip read?
Yes,
there's going to be a lot of people who are going to find it very, very tough.
Seriously, that's one of the things I do not like. I've no objection to people wearing them, and I will probably wear one myself if I go out. But you cannot see people's features. You can't read anything, and that to me, it's almost very threatening. Because most people who wear a mask, obviously, are doctors or robbers,
right? Right.
Bank managers or whatever. In my case, or tax inspectors.
Yes.
Or whatever.
Oh,
but seriously, I find it disconcerting at least to try to communicate with someone with a mask. I had to go to hospital some weeks ago for a checkup, and you obviously had to wear a mask. But the lady at the desk, I had to take it off and speak to her.
Right.
Because I just can't communicate with her. I just couldn't.
Right.
It's strange. You walk up to the desk and you hand this piece of paper and the glass, and she reads it, and then you're moved into a ward. And nobody came. The doctor came, did what they did, and then out again. There's no, and that's difficult for us. I'm not sure about you. I find it at best difficult now.
Yeah. Well, we are creatures of communication. I think we need something or someone to latch on to.
Yes. Indeed. Anyway, our guest, the late Willie McGrew. Do you remember what he said about the first radios coming home? I remember he said something about, I think it was his brother maybe, or maybe himself, with one of his first week's wages, he bought an old radio for his family, and they all gathered up to hear that.
Do you know, he was a remarkable man. He was interested in so much and so many things, and I came across his work latterly. When myself and Vincent Brogan were researching 2 local graveyards, Old Drumragh and Kappa Old Graveyard, and there were detailed maps drawn by Bill McGrew of the graves and the names and the graves. I mean, it was a great undertaking.
Yeah.
And when you...
What a legacy to leave people who want to follow on now in these days, when you think of that.
And, do you know, the strange thing was the map that he had created, even since that, some of those graves have been overgrown and have disappeared. Yeah. And when you actually walk in Old Drumragh in particular, I mean, you could be taking your life in your hands.
Oh, you really are.
I mean, there's no such thing as a straight road.
No.
But to have the foresight to do that and to do it, of his own bat.
Yes. And a very selfless thing to do, because there's no monetary award for that. There's nobody going to say you did a great job. They're just going to use a book like that and dispense with it. But it is invaluable. It really is now.
And it's great that the book is still available. He'd also did that at Hatches, Matches and Dispatches.
Yes. I imagine you probably get it in Omagh Library. I know I have a copy if anyone wanted to borrow it just to do research or whatever. Yeah. I'd like to hold on to it because it's invaluable. And some of our old family graves are in Old Drumra as well. And they're there to be seen as well.
I'm sure some of the local history societies would have access to it as well. So if you're interested out there in the ether, just look up the book.
Yeah.
Well, Donald, another interview is going to hit the air.
All been well, Declan. Yeah, it is Thursday, and Thursday's our day. And thankfully, we get some exposure now in the Ulster Herald, which gives us a chance to get something down, and for the great and good to hear what the programmes are about. They normally go live around 6 o'clock or thereabouts, so if you watch out for that, it should be on the air.
Well, you mentioned Thursday. A friend of mine many years ago when we were teenagers, Thursday was very special to him. And I says, why? He says, Thursday. He says, Bin Day, Herald Day, and New Musical Express Day.
Goodness
so that's why Thursday. So there's something else to add on to Sweet Omagh Town.
Sweet Omagh Town Day
on a Thursday. But it's great to see the hits that we're getting.
I'm amazed and I'm delighted, and I get some lovely texts, as I know I say this week in and week out, some lovely messages from people all over the world who have some connection with the town or some resonance with the town, and that gives us great hope. Certainly does now.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's such a little town that they with a diaspora all around the world, and it imagine people tuning in.
Yeah.
On Facebook and on YouTube.
Yes.
I think it's great.
But the numbers keep going up and the interviews keep coming along, and people haven't heard them for the first time. I got a nice text from someone who heard an interview we done 5-6 weeks ago, and they live outside Sligo. And the interviewee was a personal friend of their late father's. She said, "It's just lovely to hear his voice again."
My goodness. So, like I'll always remember and hopefully you will hook this interview out. Of the late Peggy McGuigan.
Very well, yes, she's here, yeah.
I remember at the start of the interview I mentioned that my granny was from Drumore, and she knew her. She knew her, and my granny left Drumore in 1913, and she knew her by her name was Mary, but she was known as Minnie. And Peg immediately says, "Oh, Minnie Farrell." Oh, it was like my granny being brought back. She's dead over 60 years.
What I really remember about that interview, it was very funny, even at the time. It sounds even funnier now. She says, to me, I got out early from the post office in 1960 on health grounds. She was 101, 102 when we spoke to her. She smiled. So she remembered Omagh. She remembered Omagh before with gaslight, and she remembers the lamplighters going around at night and stuff.
Right.
And she remembers the families who lived in the Knocknamo Hotel before it came a hotel and then eventually disappeared and things. That's right. Lovely recollection of the whole town right enough now. So we'll have to find Peggy somewhere and get it.
Oh, that would be great. The only other occasion I heard of that, somebody living such a long life after being deemed in ill health, was the great Chesney Allen. You remember Flanagan and Allen? Mm-hmm. Underneath the arches. Well, anyway, Flanagan and Allen broke up because Chesney Allen's health took a major downturn and he couldn't perform anymore. He outlived the Crazy Gang and Bud Flanagan. And in fact, I saw him on the stage of the Opera House in Belfast. Bernie Winters and Leslie Crowther were doing Flanagan and Allen, and who comes out at the end to sing? Chesney Allen himself, and he was nearly 100 years of age.
Wow!
And again, that was a Peg McGuigan moment. It was amazing. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the attitude towards the elderly, I think, has changed. Do you remember a friend of yours? Once he talked about he was a priest. And he was officiating at a wedding in America. He was there as locum.
Right, yes, I remember.
And you told me that he said to you, he says, this lady Lulabelle wanted to marry John. Yes. And she came up and says, "Father, will you marry us too?" And they're both well into their 80s, I think, at that stage. And he says, are you both free to marry? And he says, "Yeah, well, my husband's dead and John's wife, she's gone too." And I says, "Right, well, sure, I'll marry you on Saturday morning," whatever. And he says, that Lula Bell came in her lemon yellow dress, flouncing up the aisle, and John came with his Stetson and his almost like a cowboy outfit on him. And I remember his comment was, he says, back home in Ireland, he says, once people hit a certain age, they automatically don grey and black.
Yes.
And he says, but in America, no, it's a different attitude. And it's a state of mind,
It really is. Age is a state of mind, because, Dorothy, after that, she headed to Australia, and the last correspondence I would have with her, she was learning to scuba dive. 90-odd years of age.
Goodness.
And that's wonderful to do that, isn't
She was
it?
a remarkable woman. I would have heard her on Radio 4.
You would have done.
She was a very, very highly thought of
she was well got.
psychotherapist or a psychologist.
She was been brought in. Her analysis would have been well sought after for major events, and that's what brought her to Omagh, was the aftermath of this, that she wanted to find out and get to know the people in the town here. She and I remained friends up till she passed away, unfortunately, early on this year.
Yes, right. That's a lovely lady. I heard a great obituary to her, and her son was interviewed and talked a lot about her and that. It was a lovely woman.
And, Gallows Hill part of town is such a wonderful part of the town, because those old Victorian houses, while they were not maybe the plushest or best houses that people could have lived in, at their time they were good families and supported everyone in the community.
And I think that's the important part. It was a community, and any of the interviewees that came from that side of the town, from my recollection, that's what they kept coming back to, was the sense of people pulling along together and helping each other out and being proud of being from that part, and tight-knit.
Comfortable in their own skin, I would say, if that makes sense to you. Comfortable in the sense that where they came from and who they were and where they were going in the world. And I think that is unique in this town. There's a real sense of cross-community in this town that you don't get. It's not a lip service to it. It's the way people lived here in this town.
That's it. And it is. I think that resonates in Omagh. And the friendliness of people and the willingness just to engage with folks around you. The
people in this town are very articulate. Look at the interviews we have, and the stories that those people can sit down and reminisce and just recall their memories.
That's right.
And this one tonight is another gem. It's Willie McGrew talking about growing up in the hill, part of a big family. He'll take us around the town with great memories of the town and how the town has evolved over the years.
Well, I think, he was an historian at heart.
He really was, yeah.
And he had a great sense of Omagh and his place in Omagh.
Right, what's your plans for the rest of the day, Mr. Ford, this week? What are you going to do with us?
Well, looking at the inclement weather, and like yourself, me and inclemency don't get on.
Yes.
So I had hoped to get into the garden, because I fear it could become a losing battle.
Never thought of it.
Once this lockdown has ended.
Yes. Anyway, we will sit back and relax and listen to the great memories of the late and great Willie McGrew. Have a great day. Bye.
He used to be, you remember where the Pulsar shop was there at Dundry? Well, he worked on there, and I was his first message boy, and I worked there for a while. And then after a while, I got a job at better pay in April 1939 in the S Oil Company, who had their premises around Sedan Avenue, where Neely and Cowan's filling station on there. And I worked in that then for a while, and it became, the war came on in September that year, and it became Pool Petter. They were all amalgamated, Shell, BP, Pool, they're all amalgamated Pool. And our depot then was made around the Spiller's Place. Do you remember the depot around the Spiller's Place there? And that wee office used to be a tin hut on the wall, built on the wall, and the railway was behind it. And then the other side of it was the big storage tanks. They were underground. I worked in that for a while. And then after a while I was out of a job, and I got as a matter of fact, I'm not telling the truth, because whenever the summer months come for 2 years, I was put off from the petrol place, so I went back to Kerry again and worked for him. Then whenever the winter come again, I was back to the electric board. But anyway, eventually I was out of work, and it was 1941, the spring of 1941, and they were looking for a job to lay a big cable, underground cable, between Omagh and Newton Stewart for the military. And the telephone people was doing it, what we call telecoms now. So it was a pick and shovel job. So I would be given a stretch to excavate. I think it was about 18 inches deep, by about a foot wide, and there's a whole line of men, you could see them way in the distance for about a mile or more, and they were all doing their bit. So whenever you had that, your piece excavated, you marched then to the foreman, away up to the last man, and he marked his space beyond that. So while you were doing that, another guy come along, he leapt broad past you, and that's the way it went. But then after doing that for a few weeks, I was transferred up to St Angelo. They were doing an underground cable job up there for the RAF. And then that job finished then after about 3 months. And I got working for a firm up beyond the Skillen who were doing work for the military, Stewart and Partners. So we only worked a short while there. A whole lot of the fellows, they were disagreed with the wages. They felt the wages wasn't good enough, and we went on strike, and we all walked on down the Skillen on a hot summer day. A whole lot of us left it, and we got a house where they made us tea, boiled kettle with tea and all. And then after that, we got a job working for an American firm who were doing a contract for the RAF for seaplanes, bringing them up onto the shore at Knockern. And of course, the Americans at this time wasn't in the war themselves. This was before, what do we call it, Pearl Harbor, and working for them. So then I got a chance again, and I knew it was going to end very shortly. I got a chance again back into the electric board, or not the electric board, but the oil company. So after working that then, the next thing then, an opportunity come up to get a job as a cleaner on the railway, and I didn't remember about it. My parents had put it on about 3 years before it, this job, and I'd forgotten all about it. And in fact, another man was in the house, and I arrived home one day, and I said, what's this all about? And my mother told me about this job. So I couldn't remember about it. I took a word for it. And I did go into the railway, and I joined the railway 1 week exactly after Pearl Harbor Day, which actually, when I started, was Sunday night, the 14th of December. And I worked for about 2.25 years in it. And then I got to be a fireman in April 1944. But for the last third of the time I was cleaning, I was doing relief. I was out as a cleaner most of the time. So then eventually I got a job then in 1952 driving the rail car up and down the C1, C2, C3, up and down to Portadown, and I made 2 trips in the morning. On the morning duty, there was 2 duties. You made 2 trips to Cookstown back to Dungannon, like in connections. You done the same the second time you come back into Dungannon, and you continued on through to Portadown and then home. And then they closed the Cookstown line down, and we just up and down there to Portadown, the whole way. But at times there, if the rail car was out of service, was taken away to Dundalk for repairs or overhaul, or rebuilt them sometimes, they'd give me an engine and a couple of coaches and a fireman. So I'd done that. Jerry, I don't know whether you know Jerry Donnelly or not. Jerry, he was my fireman often there. He still talks about it. Yep. Mm-hmm. So then, come 1957, and in September that year, they closed the Enniskillen line down, Enniskillen and Bundoran, and right through Dundalk that way. And I was sort of disgruntled about it, and was being put back to fireman again. There's a whole lot of redundancies, and I was put being a fireman, although I was still getting driver's pay, full pay. But after a wee while then I left the job and I went to work in Dungannon. And I worked there in the glass fabrics in Dungannon for a while, and then again my luck again. About 6 months after I was under there was a slump in textiles, and there was a big firm which was 100 years in the go up in the Clare Valley, and it closed down. It's never been reopened. And on the Dungannon firm that I was working for, they paid the last 16 men off, and of course that was me back and signed the wee book again on the dole. Mm. So then eventually I got on, about a month later I got on working on the post office for Christmas for 3 or 4 days. Then I was back at the door again. Then on the 4th of January, they sent for me anyway to come to the post office. There was a postman that was off sick, and asked me would I come on and work. And this was about 5 in the morning, wasn't it? We were waking up 5 or 6 in the morning. So I had to get out and get ready, and showing the delivery. The boy come round with me. It was the name of Jock Lowe. I forget his first name now. He's a Scotsman. He's married a local girl here. And he showed me the delivery for a couple of months, and then I was on my own. Then I was in the post office then until I sat for an exam as a clerk, inside clerk, and I became a clerk then on the 4th of January, again the same day, 1970, and then I was retired then in 1987. So I'm retired nearly 10 years now.
Well, had you a family connection with the railway?
No, I hadn't. I had no connection with it really. My father, right enough, was an early, they call him a manual worker nowadays, but in those days they call him a labourer. He worked in a permanent way, the railway back in the 20s, I think it was, for those days. That's the only connection I had. I have a brother, Joe, he's 5 years younger than me. Joe was a shunter on the railway, but at the same time as me. Joe, he stayed on to the bitter end. I often regret now that I didn't continue on, you know, to the bitter end and retire in the railway, because I would have, instead of having 16 years, I would have 23 years done, another 7 years done. Another thing too, we weren't too sure, weren't told at the time, but there was a compensation of a couple of £1,000, which was a lot of money then, you know. And of course that, whenever I left the railway, that was it gone, you know. It was no, I'd made my own decision, so that was it.
Well, what were feelings like in Omagh when the railway closed down?
Well, a lot of people were very, very sorry about it. But I think looking at things nowadays and talking to people, a number of people that I've talked to at different times and places, they've said that the railway should never be closed down, and I feel the same way too. Because you look at the roads now, and they predict that within 10 years' time the traffic on the roads is going to be twice what it is now. Imagine twice now what it is now. You see there now, you see the top of the hill there, whenever I come up the path at the Greens there, and I want to go to cross over to the shop on this side there, sometimes a double job now. I was crossing today coming out of the town, and I was stood for a long time because whenever traffic had eased off in one direction, they were coming now, and you had to wait till whenever they eased off, they're coming, and you never could get a gap with nobody coming in the other direction. Oh, it's deadly. I said to Peggy McGrath times there, what they should do is they should dig an underpass there, you could go down the steps and onto the road or something, because it's really serious there, getting across the road. Sometimes I chance my arm there, and what I do is, if it's not too bad there and the traffic stops in one direction, I walk out in the middle of the road and stand there, and then since it eases off, I make the rest of the way. But again, you're jaywalking really, you know, but you do get sort of impatient, you know, especially in a hurry home there.
Well, where were you born? You were born in Omagh?
I was born in Omagh. We've been in Omagh. Now I've been doing my family history, and I've got right back to 1631 in Omagh.
My goodness.
That's right. And originally apparently they come from Scotland. I don't know where, I've been trying to find out. But I got information there from the latter days since, you know, those are Mormons. They do great work in family history, and they share it with anybody. They used to keep it themselves, the members only, but some years ago they made it open to the public, and there were a place in Derry and a place in Belfast, and there, and we have a local family history society. We go there and look through their microfilms, the birth, marriage, and death. But I got sheets there which showed a whole lot of McGrews was born in Fife, or married in Fife, born or married both. And so I don't know, but yet I'd written away about over 20 years ago. I wrote to the Edinburgh, to the two different organisations that does that sort of thing, and they said that they could find no traces of McGrew's been born in Scotland, yet I have it there and I run off on a computer printout. Right. And there's McGrew's born in Perth and one of them born in Stirling. So obviously, but where we come from, I don't know. But we've been here now for, that's 365 years, the same number of days in a year, 365 days number.
And in Omagh itself, in this area?
We've been here now. Originally there were farmers, and you know, the tenant farmers at that time, because as you know, the bigger landowners come over from England and Scotland. They were given big grants of 2,000 or 5,000 acres, so they had tenant farmers working for them, and they were tenant farmers up until the Land Purchase Act about 100 years ago. And there was McGrew's in Craven, out by Clannabogan. McGrew's, I think the main branch started off at Mullaghmena, outside of Omagh here, because I got them way back to 1670, I think is the first mention, Mullaghmena, and then they get them, the very last McGrew was 1891, same name as myself and William. He died in Mullaghmena, and that was the end of the line there. So we're here quite a good way right enough. We are probably one of the oldest, if not maybe the oldest, I don't know, families in Omagh, around Omagh. As you know, probably Omagh way back a couple of hundred years ago was only a village. It's only a village. So whenever there's no map there, and that's right. There's a map there that shows you Omagh, and there's only about 20 houses in it. So the population couldn't run any more than about 100 of them. And even whenever Omagh was burned again, it was burned twice, and the second time it was burned in 1742. It was still a small place then. There was only High Street and a few offshoot streets in it. We were all born, there was 11, if they had all lived, there had been 11 in our family, but there's 3 boys died in infancy. And we were all born in Spoonie Band terrace, every one of us there. Frankie McGrew, the painter, lived in number 1. But before Frankie lived in number 1, the people that lived there were Scarties. And they owned one of them owned a shop on Market Street on one side, and another brother owned a shop on the other side where the electric board is. I'm not too sure which is which, but Jack Gardy, you know, Jack had owned a Highland Cafe. I remember Jack living next door in number 1. Number 1's gone now, it was demolished there for the Mick. An entrance into the car park. I don't know, somebody pointed out to me that it doesn't seem to have helped it that much, because there's a big sort of outshoot, you know, a big space there seems to be lost. We grew up in New Brighton Terrace for the first nearly 25 years old, but 1 month until I left her here. She got me out of it anyway.
And what was it like living in New Brighton Terrace?
It was very good, you know. Up in New Brighton Terrace, there were good neighbours. You know, up in the area what we call Gallows Hill, there was a gallows there, as you know. There was about, I would estimate, about 60 to 7% Catholic, and the rest was Protestants. But people got on the greatest. There was no bad atmosphere. Everybody got on great, neighbours and all. And not only that, but I can remember my mother, whenever some of the younger brothers been born, and my mother confined, and she was in a bedroom of, we called it the kitchen, and you call it the living room nowadays, and she'd be in there, and a neighbour would come in, and she'd say to my mother what message she want, and my mother tell her what she wants. She'd write it down. She'd bring them up with her own groceries. And then another one would come in and go down the back and say, is this the washing sheets, shirts, towels, something else? You'd take them away, bring them back the next day, wash and iron. Somebody else would come in, and at that time it was laying on the floor. Somebody come in and sweep the floor, even wash it, but you know, that's the kind of people it was. And there was as much Catholic people as Protestant. Was McCullers.
The McGillians and the Only from McLaren.
Johnny McLaren, and McCullers across the road. Lived just over in St Patrick's
Kelly's and all them.
Kelly's, that was Johnny Kelly, give me the foot in the backside. But I never held it against the man, you know. Well, you know where Glenview Terrace is there? Well, the wall in Glenview Terrace used to be about 4 or 5 foot more forward than the present wall, and was higher, and there was railings along the top of it, and laurel bushes and behind it. And one time, me and about 3 or 4 of boys, we got a spool of black thread, and we tied to Johnny Kelly's knocker, a big heavy knocker, you know, about a foot long nearly, and we went across the street, climbed up over the wall, hid behind the bushes, pulled the string, knock, knock, and we knew that Johnny lived, the living room was away at the back of the house, so we had to come up a passage. So Johnny come up, and we let the string go slack, you see, the thread. Johnny come out, looked up and down, waited a minute or two, closed the door. So done the same thing again, knock, knock. We give him time to get to the back, you see. Well, we were rascals. So anyway, done the same thing, but the third time Johnny come out, we saw him putting the hand up, and we knew the game was up. And if we had crept away, we'd have got it all right, but we ran, we panicked. And Johnny, he come running after us, and he's a big man, you know, about 15 or 16 stone. Now he's only a skinny around a cub, about maybe 9, 10, you know. And Johnny come up and caught me, because I was the slowest, I was the shortest legs, and he put his big number 9 or 10 boot where I would have been sitting down. But anyway, I went home that night, right enough it hurt. And I went home that night, I never told my father about it. My father's dead now over 40 years, he never knew about it, because if I had told him, he'd have said, he'd have given another one for annoying the neighbours, because everybody got on well together. But yet, the strange thing about it was, like, in years later, whenever I grew up there, and I was a teenager, like, you know, I met Johnny Kelly, like, and it was, you know, but whether he remembered or not, like, I never held against him, you know. It didn't hurt anymore. But I never had any animosity about him, you know.
You know, there must be a great community atmosphere then up around there.
There was, and I'll tell you another thing too. I know ones there, the McCrumlishes and them, and sometimes I meet them, and I start talking about the days in the hill. It was a great atmosphere, you know, and there used to be crowds of young ones. And whenever the summer holidays come, we got 5 or 6 weeks in the holidays. We used to all head away out, and we'd finish up about Lochmuck or somewhere walking, and burling hoops along. Do you remember the hoops? And we used to take the hub and the spokes out of the wheel, and had a tyre in it. And some of the boys had the deluxe, they had a tube, a pneumatic. They thought it was great of these. And we used to build them along. And if we were way out somewhere and we were late getting back again for our tea and they got hungry, if there was an crab apple orchard, somebody used to keep that, and somebody slipped through the hedge, some of the boys, and pinched them. And of course, on several occasions, I remember some of us boys taking crab apples, and the next morning we were growing them. Oh, my stomach killed us, you know. Another thing sometimes they used to take was carrots out of a field. But I never liked carrots, but I remember once or twice facing a turnip, and there's a wee penknife and scripting the turnip, but it's hard going. And I'd cook turnip, but if you're hungry, you know, hungry cub.
Did you see me, the grandchildren did all that?
That's deadly.
No,
Taking turnip. But now the lads now, you hear them talking about going for a walk, and they walk out to the swinging bars, and they think that's it. Do you know, I still go for long walks, and I go out to Lochmuck, and at times there, I've went out a couple of times this summer. I walked down the road, and out the old Mountfield Road to Killyclogher, go up the hill past the chapel, turn left, round by the waterworks, do you know where that is? And finish the Killyclogher Road. And it's lovely up there because you never heard any car, and you have the whole place all to yourself, and it's lovely and peaceful. And you've a great view, and it's beautiful. I love to get away from the noise and smell and cars and people and everything.
What shops were there around the hill?
Well, there was Smith's shop was the only one, but there. Oh wait a minute, down at the bottom, you know where McConnell's electric place there. There used to be a man. What's they call him? It was Bob. He was McConnell. That's a wee shop, Bob McConnell, and he had a wee sort of a small. We'd have called it a huckster shop years ago. Sweets and light groceries, one thing. I think he's dead now, years. So then the nephew then. Sam McConnell Senior, he got it and he turned out the electric place. But he used to go down to McConnell's wee shop or up to Smith's, and sometimes there on an Easter day, if you got, and you used to get better weather on Easter than you do now in April, and you could have went out in the fields and, you know, up where the St. Patrick's School is and St. Bridget's, we used to go up and play around there, and there used to be crab apple trees there along there, and also there was plum trees. That's how they probably got the name of Orchard Terrace, the terrace leading up to it. It was known originally as Orchard Row, and then they changed it then after some years to Orchard Terrace. But there was a sort of you wouldn't call it an orchard, there was a laneway with the hedges growing both sides, and on the right hand side there was trees and there was crab apples, but they grew quite big, you know. But they were bitter. But we used to gather some of them and bring them home to the mothers. She used to make apple pies out of them, you know, you could use them for that. But the only thing is, sometimes you went to the ripe and you say, oh, they're a wee bit small yet, we're leaving for another week, and then you're back in the next week, me and some of the boys were furious. Somebody beat us to it, somebody got there, and there was nothing there at all. But then there was plum trees. They were bigger than the dams and quite a large size, you know, and they used to grow further on up, just a bit where the upper school was, that by St. Bridget's, whatever. I can't remember. And they used to be, they were quite sweet and pleasant to take there.
What about the back alley?
There was the back alley in behind us there, behind New Brighton Terrace. It was the original main row up there, main houses, and then I suppose the people there was a bit annoyed at the building New Brighton and front and overlooking them, you know, overlooking them. But New Brighton Terrace, there was 10 houses. They were all thatched at that time, and they were up to the top end. But then at this end next to were Hamilton's Forge. Do you remember Hamilton's Forge? Well, there used to be a blacksmith. Hamilton was at the end of that wee row of houses, you know, McKelvey's travel places. There used to be Hamilton's house, and then the forge next to the house and the forge are both gone now. And then next to the forge, then leading up towards these 10 houses, and there was a gap only about that width there. You could just get a bicycle down to the back. There was 4 stories, and on the front, coming off, you went up steps, and there was 4 families there. But if you went down this entry and round the back, there was 4 more doors at the underneath, so one family lived above, no stairs in between. So if you had noisy neighbours above you, you're in trouble, you know. But that's the way it was. There was actually that'd be 18 houses there. But then sometime during the mid-30s, they took the thatch off those houses and they put galvanised tin roofs, and they used to call it, I don't know, part of Kelvin Road, and I never really found out, was known as Tin Town, but I think that's how they got the name, was because of the tin. Used to be some crack. I remember we used to watch out of the bedroom window whenever we put to bed, and only about 5, 6, 7 years of age, and on summer's night we could have heard the train coming on and stopping with a technical schoolhouse and blowing the whistle, and you could have seen it. There was no, you couldn't see it now because the new Christian Brothers School is on the way, more or less. But you used to hear the train blowing at night time, and it was doleful sound, you know. But sometimes in the back alley, there was one water tap served everybody. There was a water tap on the post about 18 inches high, and everybody used it. And I remember as a cub, some of the women used to fall out, you know, on some of the language was, oh, terrible, you wouldn't print it. But I remember seeing one case as a cub, and there was two women, one of them come from around the back, one of these houses at the back, so came up the entry. Another woman lived in one of the 10 houses, and they come down and they were waiting to fill their buckets. One was filling, but they fell out about something, and this woman was giving the woman that was getting her bucket filled a slagging. So the woman said nothing, and when the bucket gets filled, she just lifted it over the top of it, doused it with it. And another occasion, there was a bit of a row on between them. Oh, that was terrible, and the language was terrible, and my mother had an idea that we would probably be looking out the window, but she came up, and there was a large family, as you know, and there was 3 of us as boys who slept in a small back bedroom at the back of the house, and she came up and we had the window down, we were all listening to us, saying, mother, come on. She never said, but we knew, even young as and others were, we knew the reason was, but she says, come on, you have to go to school, you know, get back into bed again, and you get your draft, you get your death with the window open, the drafts, you close the window up and pull the curtains over, but she was hardly at the foot of the stairs till we had back again the window down. Oh. But they're good people, like, you know, they're good people that they could, someone could get hurt to watch. And you know, another instance I remember was, you remember what they call the bosoms? I remember one woman racing another woman with a bosom, and she was trying to bat it. I don't know why she succeeded. The other one was running for life for fear of this woman, you know, with a bosom coming after her. But they're good. But there was round the back alley on the steps of those houses, the one next to Ford's, there was 3 or 4 steps. There was a man called Mullen, and there was another man lived in another house. I don't know whether it was round the back or further on up. He was named Hardy Lochern. And I remember on a summer night, listening to them sitting on the steps, and one of them had a banjo and the other one had a melodeon, and them playing tunes just for their own amusement, and them playing Red Sails in the Sunset and all the songs were popular at those times. That's right, just good to hear. There's nothing like that nowadays at all.
Well, was there much music around there when you were growing up?
There wasn't too much now because, well, in our family, the first radio ever we got was one I saved up my money for the time I was working for the telephones and laying the cable. The pay was good right enough, and I saved up money and bought a radio. That was in autumn of 1941. We hadn't a gramophone before. Well, my father built me a sleigh. I think it was a sleigh, and there's a fellow his father worked in a T&F hospital. He was named Coyle, Mervyn Coyle, and Mervyn and I was at school together. We done a swap, and Mervyn gave me a portable gramophone. And we used to sit out on the steps, you know, for our house, and we used to mooch the records from the neighbours, you know. We got some of the rarest records, you know. There was one record we got, it was a big 12-inch record of, and there was only one side in it, the other side was blank, and there was Enrico Caruso, you remember him? The tenor. We couldn't understand, we played, we thought it was great, it was really good. It was Mr. Zallen actually gave us that one. But we had that there, and the only thing about it was, there was no winder with the gramophone, and the way you had to wind it up, you had to put your finger on the turntable and turn it in reverse order, keep winding away till you felt it get tight. But then eventually, from an old gramophone that was defunct, I got a winder off them, which fitted, so it should have done right. But
don't forget about your father and the melodeon.
Well, my father did. That's right. I forgot about that. My father was a great man, the melodeon, and down where the telephone exchange was, there used to be a barn there, and they used to hold dancers on it, you know, just a local dance, you know, barn dance. My father, more often than not, was down playing the melodeon. He was the only musician on it. But he used to, During the 1930s, he used to sometimes if he wasn't too tired there, he'd take a melodeon down and bring it down to the living room, and on winter night they'd play the melodeon, and we'd sing the songs, Alexander's Ragtime Band tunes. We'd sing to it, it was very good. He was good at the... He's good at... Another thing too, he was great at too, he was an expert as the spoons. Remember the two spoons?
Yes.
That's right. As cubs, me and my brothers, and used to sometimes have a wee, what they call the Spoonie Band. One of us play a spoon, and I'll play the comb and pepper. And one of us could play. I could play the mouth organ, but I still have the old mouth organ upstairs. I wasn't that good at it. We used to play there, play our tunes and things. There was the same. There was a brook in Brook Street, and I remember there's another fellow got asked by two. He made me tell you Tom Crawford. He'd be a cousin of Willie Potts's, and he says he remembers them going down where the brook was down Brook Street, and them going underneath the houses, Brook Street houses, because it ran underneath the houses, and they come out at the bridge, near the bridge there. But now it's all piped in. The only water you see is where it emerges at the bridge there. Well, that's how I got the name of the brook there. But that other place they call the brook now, you want to show it on, but it's nothing to be seen. It's all in big concrete pipes, nothing there. But still, I thought I wrote it down. I wrote it down there, and what I done was, I was doing streets and all mainly, to give Bridge Street, or Bridge Lane now. People don't know what it was because we've only half the width of what it is. And then it's now Bridge Street, and the bridge was double in width on the Campsie side in the 1819. And then the broad road is the Derry Road, and then the brook is a no name for area between the Preston Christian Brothers School, Kevin Road, and Old Railway Bridge, now demolished. And I thought it'd be the pity there to let those things disappear. And I wrote down my own information, and I hope too that maybe I'd get it passed on to young ones studying at the school there. So Dr. Mitchell, he put it in his book, and I didn't mind, I wasn't looking money for it. I was happy enough to let him see it. But as I say, I've added a few more things there, the Wardrops Cottages on the side of the road. I don't know where it is, WRDROPS, King George's Field, Playground, Campsie Crescent.
All right, that's down behind McAlear's Bar. And
pardon?
That's down in that's behind McAlear's Bar. That is not just off the Campsie.
That area where Campsie Crescent sort of surrounds it there.
Sure, there's a playground.
And there's even two pillars there. Whenever you walk along, coming on there from Campsie Avenue, those houses facing each other. First of all, well, on the left-hand side, when you come to the last house, there's two pillars, square pillars. Into the place, there's no gates in it, but on one of the pillars there's a crest with the name King George's Fields.
Was that, I wonder, was that set up then when he became king, or?
I don't know which George it was now. I presume it was one of the Georges, but I don't know which one was. Then another thing I found out was really lately was Fairmount Terrace. The houses facing across what used to be Commons looking towards Trinity Church. That was known as Fairview Terrace at one time. And then there's, do you know where Drumflough is? DRUMFLOUGH or DRUMFLUGH.
No.
That's an old name for the old marketplace area, that area? It's known as Drumflough, or Drumflough.
Right. I wonder, was that a town land then? I wonder.
It must have been well, again, you see, there's places and there's names in them, but they're not town lands. You get Shergram now, out past Strathroy. It's called Shergram, but it's not given us town lands. It's not given us a town land. Also, Gartna Garn out the road there where McGear's are, that's not a town land, that's in a town land. But I would say, somebody suggested to me, I think it was Kit McAllister in Lively, she suggested that possibly those were subdivisions of town lands.
Right.
But, and then, the area there where the health centre is, the part of the back where the wee lake is. Well, on some of the old maps, there's a name for it. There's a funny long name, but you never see it now. A lot of those old names have all disappeared, subdivisions of, apparently that's what they must have been, of town lands, and nobody knows where they are. That's what I thought this would be a good idea to get this going here.
Yes, and get them down, and get them
like,
down.
I've accumulated a wee bit of knowledge. I wouldn't say that much, but I have accumulated a bit of knowledge. I don't mind sharing it, around, because I think knowledge should be disseminated. People shouldn't keep it themselves, Some people do that. and they keep themselves. Now, there's instances I've known of there in our family history society, I've read about it there, you get Americans writing over to societies here in Ireland or people in Ireland looking for information on a certain family. And it's been discovered those people maybe were looking for McLaughlin, maybe. They're not McLaughlin, but they're a researcher themselves and they're doing work for McLaughlin, genealogical work. They get the information off you free, and you think it's their family, and then they go to people and they say that'll be $100 for that. You know. Well, it's racket. So I don't mind, like, you know, sharing. Again, I don't be looking for my name, like, you know, I'm not looking for glory or anything in my name. Although the only thing is, I should say in that instant, I wouldn't have minded if the man had said, this was told to me by a local, you know. If you go down to the river there, down at Abbey Street, and you walk along towards St. Lucy Barrack there, if you go along a bit, there's a sort of pile of earth, and you walk up in there, and it's regularly made around it, topping it, and you put your head on, there's a shaft, a perfectly round shaft, and behind the wall, they call it the Monk's Well. I don't know why, but Vincent Brogan, that works in the council, he told me here about some of the boys are supposed to have got a rope and got a young lad and lowered him down into the well, and they found what they call a drummer's sword. It's just a metal sword, steel sword with a brass handle. And I've seen that sword. Packy, you give it to Packy McGrew, and Packy they loaned it me, and I had it here for about a month in the house here, wrapped up just in newspaper. There's no scabbard for it. But I had this sword and it's supposed to come out now. I know Packy and them said it would come definitely from the well, but you know, you've always wee doubts, you know, is it really, you know, or somebody made it up? But that sword's there. You can see it there, if you ask Packy McGrew there, Packy, I'm terrible at it. Packy Brogan.
Oh, the library.
And the library, aye. Packy Brogan, aye. But then there was a Franciscan friar set up about the 14th and 15th century, and was there for a good while then, and then it was taken over by I think a man by the name of L-E-A-G-H. He was an Englishman who was given control of the town, the Omagh town. He owned the town, and in fact there were several brothers. There was Edmund Leigh and Daniel Leigh. One of them, I think he was Sir Edmund Leigh, and they owned the property, and they took it over and evicted the poor friars out of the place, and they took it over as a sort of a castle and made it stronger, you know. And because the funny thing about this, you know those files that I was telling you about the Omagh that they have in the library. Well, and one of the early ones, it shows you a drawing that was made, and it shows you the old abbey at Omagh. Then later on, in another book and in another issue, it shows you the old castle. And looking at the two photographs, they're exactly the same. Or two sketches. It's a pretty good sketch. They're both the same arches and the same design. All. So it must be that you know, Leigh took it over and used it, made a photo.
Who took over the nest?
There used to be a castle somewhere, you know. There was not a castle down the bottom of town, and it's believed to be in the area where. Do you know where McCarlin's shop used to be? You know, Carlin's paper shop near Stanley Thompson's there. It was supposed to be in there. Now we don't know, but it's supposed to be in there. It was built by the Neils actually, and then again in the early days that. In Ireland here, there was the Neils and Dungannon, they come down and they wrecked the castle. And then later on, some of the Neils and McGrew, they went up to Dungannon and wrecked them. And then they come down and they wrecked the one in Omagh again. Then there was quite a lot of, you know, they talk about peace and all in Ireland. There wasn't. There was more. There was 5 kings, as you know, one for each province. Then the High King of Tara, and then there was more. Chieftains and sub-chieftains, they fought tooth and nail among each other. That's right. So you ever read through there, they're around in their library, the vast volumes, the annals of the 4 masters, you ever read them? It's sort of like a diary. Oh, it takes a while. But the same was on Scotland too, so there was more raiding and thieving went on there too. And there was a clan there in McFarlane, and they always done the cattle raiding, or rustling as we call it. They always done it during the full moon. Well, the result of the full moon was called McFarlane's Lantern. That's right. So it's the same everywhere, like, you know.
I believe down at Carlin's, the old RIC station, or an old RIC station.
I'll tell you what, there's Stanley Thompson's. And if you stand outside the street and look at Stanley Thompson's, there's a sort of fascia, a thing, not the right word for it. And it ends just up about Carlin's, and just where it ends, you can see like an indent, about the size of football, bigger, and an indent on the wall. If you could get the fascia away, you'd see the whole lot. But Jimmy O'Neill, he says that originally you could see the what's they call it, the harp, a crest there, you see crest. But then the police station was in different places. One time it was up about where, opposite where Welworth was. Another occasion it was down the entry there behind MG O'Kane's. And then another occasion, it's actually marked in the old maps. I have a copy, got a copy of it, 1832, the very first map made of the Royal Engineers done it. There's the police station that's just about where, the house there at the end of Bell's Bridge, this end was knocked down, then the new place built. Who's this? Was there, it's just before you come to the police station. There's a house, you remember, was there right up against the bridge, and then it was knocked down some years ago. And then they built a new place on it. You go down the corner and you have the restaurant. The restaurant's right beside it. Actually, I have made a sort of point there. If I know if a place is going to be demolished, I get the camera out and go and take a photograph of it. But unfortunately, I was beat because the wife and I had a car. We had a car at the time, and we were going into the town to do shopping. That time you could go on Bridge Street, and I looked up and seen the scaffold around this house, and I said, they must be going to do some work at the house, never bothered. And if I'd have known, I'd have turned the car and back to the house and got the camera. Yes. The next thing I'd seen the next day, it was gone. The place was demolished. Another place I would like to take a photograph of too was the old station master's house on the Demo Road. It was gone too. Although there's a photograph on the Herald there, and I got a copy of it right enough. That's all I have of it, But I took photographs now of, the houses on the Demo Road there, where Milers had the shop. Mm-hmm. Well, I took photographs from the other end, from underneath the bridge, looking diagonally across one end, and then from the car park at the other end of the pub, the Coach Inn pub, looking this way. I'd done the same at Brook Street. I stood up, with those three, those three memorials, like bush, like, yes. They're concrete, like trefoils or something like that. I took a photograph looking along Brook Street, and then I went away up to the other end and took one back. So, And then I took photographs there up in Gallows Hill too, and I photographs of St. Patrick's Street, both sides, looking at the top, looking down on both sides, and then went down to the bottom and done the same again. Because they're pretty like, those places and younger generation coming up, they don't know what it looks like.
I mean, for the brothers' houses now, that was a private house at one stage, wasn't it? Was that Monaghan?
That's right, Monaghan. Before that, Frank Crawford of Crawford Wilson's.
And how far would that house have gone back there?
Just about the same distance back. Yeah. I remember that big house. We were afraid to go in there,
Why was that? What is it?
I don't know, just as young, we were fearful. There was an orchard behind it. Some of the boys used to go down the alley past Smith's shop. There's an alley goes down there, and there's 4 houses in behind. It's actually a continuation of New Brighton Terrace from 15 to 18. And someone used to climb up over the wall and rob out. I never done it, I never had the courage. But I had a cousin lived in the second last house at the back, and he built one of the first radios, or wireless as they call it in Omagh. And it was just like a box with a lid opened out, and there was a big high tension battery, and then you had to have 2 wet batteries. One of them was in charge and the other one was in use, and then swap them around. Steels or some of them places about the town used to do the charging up, and then a grid bias battery, and you had to have an aerial and an earth too, under the ground, a spike in the earth, and they got permission from Crawford's to put a thing from there, one of the trees, over to the house, the eaves of the house, and then a wire dropped down then and then went through the window. And I remember that wireless, and it must have been about 1930 or 31, and my father had given a hand now to fix up the aerial, and my uncle Jack Cowan and his son, he's dead now, Henry, they had built this thing out of parts, valves and condensers and all, coils. So we listened, and there was nothing to be heard at all. So we, a bit disillusioned, we went round home and down to New Brighton Terrace. We were taking our tea anyway, and the next thing, I think it was Willie McGrew come charging the house. Come on, he says there's a piano playing. So the tea we just got the tea down rolling round. At that time the piano was up, it was working right enough, but that's one of the first radios. I think one of the first radio would say that I ever heard was Henderson, Henderson that had the Foundry. They were supposed to have built the first, it was built one too. And the speaker was a big thing, a big horn, stood on a round base. heavy bass, and then it went up like a gooseneck, and then turned around, come forward facing it, and you could put your head inside of it. Big horn thing. Now you look at the wee radios in the car in my pocket now.
As many's a gay night from dark till daylight I spend with people of high renown. But in all their grandeur and heaps to squander, my heart would wander for sweet Omagh town.